Okay, the biggest conversation happening in the United States of America right now is just miles away from me here in Austin, Texas. On the border of Texas, there's a standoff going on. There's people that are, trying to say we deserve to have a border. Many, politicians that are trying to fight this are saying without a border, you have no nation. This is a major conversation going on. As I said at the top of the show, recent polling just last week shows that this has now become the #1 issue in America. And it's not just red, it's not just blue. Everybody's concerned. New York schools, children being moved out of schools in order to keep immigrants warm. This is a massive problem. What's behind it? What's going on? I've got one of the, I think, most dynamic individuals that can bring us some real clarity coming right up. If you happen to be, coming out of a coma for the last month or so, then maybe you didn't see this in the news.
The scale of the problem is unprecedented.
Authorities say they are overwhelmed. Encounters have now exceeded 250,000.
The border has never been worse.
New concerns on the southern border as more migrants risk their lives to enter the U.S.
A stampede of people rushing down to the edge of the river just after midnight, but they went rushing into the water and crossed illegally right into Eagle Pass.
The state of Texas has been left pretty much abandoned by the federal immigration authorities.
And we know this migrant flow is going to continue based on what's happening south of the border. Last month at the border crossing between Colombia into Panama, nearly 82,000 migrants crossed.
In Colombia is where they gather to go through the Darien Gap.
Panama is an invasion corridor to the United States, and there's huge numbers of people coming from about 150 countries, and they come through Colombia, and then they head through that jungle called the Darien Gap.
Texas is blocking federal agents from processing migrants in a public area of Eagle Pass.
State authorities late Wednesday began adding razor wire, fencing, and gates to shut off access to Shelby Park and an area under a port of entry bridge.
Texas's Republican Governor Greg Abbott deployed National Guard troops to the park. They are now preventing U.S. Border Patrol agents from entering and patrolling the area.
This part of the border is a common spot for migrant crossings. Federal government says Border Patrol agents can no longer access or view the stretch of the border.
Just last month, there was a historic surge of migrants that illegally crossed into this very property, overwhelming Border Patrol and the state of Texas. As part of Governor Abbott's emergency declaration, the state of Texas is also now arresting migrants who illegally cross into this park and this state. That is a massive change in procedure in this park.
The Department of Homeland Security issuing a letter to the state's Attorney General demanding Texas immediately cease and desist any actions that block Border Patrol's full access to the U.S.-Mexico border in and around the Shelby Park area.
Essentially saying that if the state and the Texas National Guard do not remove all barriers to this park by Wednesday, that DOJ is going to consider all other options available to restore Border Patrol access to the border.
Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton fired back in a letter this afternoon saying Texas isn't backing down.
The Supreme Court tonight giving the Biden administration a win in its effort to remove that wire fencing.
5-4 vote now clears the way for federal agents to actually cut down the wire, which administration officials have called dangerous and inhumane.
It means federal agents can resume cutting razor wire, but Governor Abbott says the state will keep adding more wire, saying the state's constitutional right to defend itself outweighs federal law.
The Constitution itself is the supreme law of the land. The Constitution itself provides Texas with a right of self-defense in this case because the United States has abandoned its responsibility to defend Texas.
All right, well, it's my honor and pleasure to be joined right now by ex-Green Beret, war correspondent, and probably one of the biggest experts on this immigration crisis going on, Michael Yon.
Thanks, Dal.
It's a pleasure to have you back on the show.
Thank you for having me back on. It's been a year, right?
Yeah, it's been a year, and what a crazy year it's been. In many ways, you predicted that we would hit this sort of crisis point. I mean, it was fairly obvious to anyone looking at it. But first of all, let me ask the question. I know you've been in Panama for months. We've been talking to you. There's even a moment where I was trying to see if I could get down there. But why are you in Texas right now? What brings you up here?
Well, I'm in Texas for border issues as well. But, as I was watching in the control room and you're talking about the death, it's just amazing how this hybrid war that we're in, it has so many facets, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's got obviously the pharmacide, which is absolutely massive.
Yep.
And then the demographic war that's going on, which is massive. I mean, I'm down in places like Morocco and Lithuania and Netherlands, Japan, looking at the same thing. I go, on the ground to all these places, right? So I've just gotten back from the Darien Gap a day and a half ago. I was down there with actually Brett Weinstein and Dr. Chris Martinson, Ann Vandersteel, and Masako Ganaha, the whole gang,
great
right?
group, yeah.
Yeah, and Brett is something else. When you get into the jungle, a lot of people are kind of afraid of the jungle. I was afraid that Brett was going to disappear in the jungle and not come back.
Never come back.
The man loves the jungle. But, I mean, it was a lot of fun with Brett. An unexpected side turn. We were looking for bats in the jungle. But one of the things I think that Brett learned, if you talk with him, is that the ecosystem that creates these invasion flows, and that's what they are. It's quite massive. It's quite organized. It's very professional. And in fact, a day and a half ago, before I jumped on the airplane, I was at their headquarters in Panama City, something called the City of Knowledge, right? And the City of Knowledge now, it used to be Fort Clayton, for those who know about Fort Clayton. And so
this used to be sort of American territory on the canal there. And was it, I believe, was it Jimmy Carter that sort of handed that back?
Right. And so in 1999, it officially went back to Panama. So it was Fort Clayton at that time. We basically gave them Fort Clayton with the keys in the doors. Okay. Beautiful base. And it's right next to the Miraflores locks, for those who know what I'm talking about, and the Pan American Highway Bridge. Or some people call it the old Zonians would call it the Thatcher Ferry Bridge, right? Okay. Well, that's the bridge for Highway 1 that goes over the Panama Canal. And so about 62 of the NGOs, IGOs, and nonprofits, such as IOM, HIAS, NRC, all these acronyms that a lot of people probably don't know what I'm talking about. But anyway, it's a who's who in the zoo. Hundreds of millions, if not billions of U.S. dollars are pumping into this. It's mostly the United States that's funding our own invasion. A lot of people don't realize that.
So you're saying that down where we used to, now it is set up in what used to be sort of American, military territory. Now it's all these NGOs from around the world, giant buildings, tons of money pouring in, all as a part of an effort to help these migrants, or invaders as you call them, from almost every nation in the world, to take a free trip through Panama on your way up to our wide open border. Is that?
Yeah, it's epic. I mean, I could talk for days about it, so I'll try to summarize.
Okay.
For instance, there's different ecosystems of people coming in. There's the Chinese, as an example.
Okay.
They have their own sort of a pipeline within a pipeline. Many of the Chinese will come in through Quito, Ecuador. Then they'll go up through Colombia. Actually, Anthony Rubin, my good friend who just went through there.
And they advertise this. We found this. This is a Chinese advertisement that's on their social media here's how you get into America and become an American. Take a look at this, folks. It's going to blow your mind. This is advertising for the trip into America. My only question there is, why don't they hop on the scooter sooner? But I mean, outrageous, right? And I wonder, do you think, when we think about the border and the drug cartels are playing such a major part of this, I mean, it's almost like they're travel agents to the world right now, bringing people through. I mean, there's a chance they paid for that ad, right? Like, come on down to Panama, we'll get you into America.
Oh, absolutely. You've got another video that is straight up a travel agency. And we know a lot about their travel networks. We know many of their snakeheads. The snakehead is the Chinese name for coyotes.
Okay.
And actually, I'd like to shout out for our China team for finding so many of these videos and so much of the information which is in Mandarin. And so every day they're scouring the net. For instance, we see how they get Vietnamese passports, Cambodian passports, passports from Laos. So we see how they do this all over the place. So the bottom line is, for instance, Actually, many of the Chinese don't go through Quito or Colombia or the Darien Gap. Many bypass. They'll fly straight to Mexico City if they can, or to Cancun. They'll go on vacations in Cancun and link up with their snakeheads there, do a vacation, and then they come across the borders in places like McAllen and Yuma and San Diego.
Yeah.
And so it goes on and on. That's the Chinese ecosystem. And within the Chinese pipeline, there's sub-pipelines. Some are coming up to run illegal or legal marijuana grows in Maine and Oregon, Oklahoma, California. What are they putting in this marijuana, right? I mean, obviously, you're dealing in the pharma world and the chemical world. I mean, they're in the fentanyl world, and they're in the marijuana world. They're doing huge marijuana grows, right? So there's Chinese that are coming in at that level.
You have a video of one of these guys. I don't know if he's Chinese or from some Asian country that you think could potentially be a bad guy. Let's just take a look at this, and you can explain to me what we're looking at.
Not all, I think.
Okay, this is at San Vicente camp down in Darien province. This is the camp that Secretary of Homeland Security,
¿De dónde?
¿Qué es eso? ¿Qué es eso?
¿De dónde?
¿Qué es eso?
¿Qué país?
¿Qué es eso?
What?
Video, ¿no? No quiero video.
Okay.
Shut it down, please.
Which country are you from?
Delete it, I'll tell you about it.
What?
Delete the video. Delete the video, and I'm gonna tell you everything about it.
Delete the video.
Delete it right now, please.
No, I'm not gonna tell anything to you.
No. Before I get mad, please delete it right now. You got me, lady.
Where are you going?
You gotta
you
stop
going?
that video. I don't like it. I don't like lady. I'm being reasonable. Please delete it.
I'm pretty sure you're a spy.
But I can't tell. Oh, come on, you were shooting.
You're a spy, brother.
Okay, I'm gonna tell everything about it. 他们是美国人，我可以跟他们说。你先走吧，他们是美国人，我可以跟他们说。All right, now I'm gonna tell everything about it. Delete the video. I'm gonna get into there. All right.
Why don't you come sit with us?
What?
Come sit with us.
Go with you.
Sit with us here.
Yes,
We're at the restaurant.
Let's go.
Come on.
Okay, we then talked with him for an hour and a half, right?
Okay.
His name is Lushan Zhao. He didn't tell us that, but we figured it out through various means. He said that that's him. So we got one of his ID cards back in China. So the bottom line is he had, for the next hour and a half, he told his story, right? And he said that he had bought a boat from a Scotsman in Nassau, the Bahamas. China has a huge embassy in the Bahamas, by the way. He said he bought it for $5,000. He was headed to Florida. He said he ran out of fuel. And the U.S. Coast Guard picked him up. We were able to confirm the U.S. Coast Guard did, in fact, pick him up. So he was deported somehow back to the Bahamas. The Bahamas, he said, was deported. We've got this on audio. The Bahamas was deporting him back to China. He connected in Cuba. And in Cuba, he told us that he changed his flight to Quito, Ecuador. And that's when he got into the ecosystem, right? So then he goes through Colombia, through Darien. And there's this one place that I wait to talk with them as they come out of the jungle. And that's the spot. I just happened to be with Anthony Rubin and others, so that's why there was more.
So let's talk about this, because this is what really fascinated me when we've been talking to you while you were down in Panama, is there's these gigantic camps, right? They fly in, and there's just these massive clear cuts where it looks like they're clearing out forests, and these camps are just getting bigger and bigger. Some of them filled with Venezuelans, I guess, and Chinese. Do they all congregate together, or are the camps sort of secular? Are they like in their own, with their own groups? But how big are these camps? What are we talking about?
Okay, that's an interesting question. The camps are clearly growing. I go out to the camps often, and we drone the camps, or I just go walk around in them with the Indians, the Imbra Indians, Kuna Indians.
Okay.
And also sometimes I just go back with airplanes, charter them, so I can get higher and see more. You can't see much of them on Google Earth, by the way.
Okay.
But in any case, the camps not only are getting bigger and more, they're just more efficient. Like, for instance, the camp that he's going to is called San Vicente Camp, right?
Okay.
And I've spent months right beside that camp at a hotel called Tenose, right? Now, there's an office right beside, about 40 meters away from the front gate of San Vicente. I call it China Camp.
Okay.
There's a HIAS office there. HIAS is the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, right? Now, Secretary of Homeland Security Mayorkas used to be a board member on HIAS.
Really?
So, yeah, and in fact, I was getting ready to rent that house, and HIAS rented it before I could get it. right?
Okay.
So, but that's right beside what we call China Camp. Now, when Secretary of Homeland Security Mayorkas flew to Darien on April 18th of 2022, I had been waiting for him for 4 days. And he landed in 4 Blackhawks, landed right in front of me, went right past the highest office, and went into San Vicente Camp. Now, he has pledged money to build it, which he has. So that camp is now, you can see the drone footage of the day he's in it. That's it.
Wow,
that's
look at that.
That's his people going in right there. He's in the middle of that thraggle.
So we're funding this.
We're funding
We're paying to make these camps as stopovers to make it comfortable for you while you prepare yourself to come into our country illegally.
And there's IOM, or in Spanish it's OIM. They are the main engine of the invasion. That's something I took Brett to see.
What does OIM stand for?
And IOM is the International Organization for Migration.
Okay.
So IOM or OIM, depending on your language, right?
Okay, very good.
They are the main engine for this. Of course, that engine did not create itself. They are a subcomponent of the United Nations. So if you go to the City of Knowledge in Panama City, right next to Miraflores Locks, old Fort Clayton, the IOM has they have the best office space. Their flag flies over where the U.S. flag used to fly, IOM flag, right? And so they've got office number 110. So if you look that up on the map, it's the best office space in all of Panama, I would say. It overlooks.
Now, let me, like, I would think, Office of Migration, you would think they're working on getting you proper paperwork, figuring out who you are, but that's not what they're doing. They're not planning a migration, they're planning an invasion. They're helping you come to our country illegally. They're not there saying, how do we do this legally for you, are they?
No, in fact, one of the things that Highest does, who works in their office is very close to IOM. There's their office up in the City of Knowledge in Panama City, and then there's the office down in Darien. Highest often coaches people on what to say when you get to the U.S. border, how to get through the Mexican border, and all these what to tell people and that sort of thing, how to fill out the paperwork, how to say that you're running from persecution and that sort of thing. So Highest helps with a lot of legal information, and I can give you tons more on them. It's a who's who in the zoo.
And you were telling me when you were down there that you had these images of just boats full of, at that moment, Chinese just coming up the river, just moving. And then I feel like you said to me that we're even building bridges and like making pathways and roadways by which the amount of time it used to take you to get through the Darien Gap to get up to the American border, that we're helping reduce that time, so that's happening faster. Tell me a little bit about that.
Oh, very fast. For instance, we know of one Chinese from China, not from Malaysia or something, and he got all the way through and up to Brooklyn and got a driver's license in about 10 days.
10 days?
Yep, that's pretty fast. But keep in mind, the Chinese are coming into their own ecosystems, right? So a lot of the Chinese will go to Flushing, New York, others go to Brooklyn, others go to California, Florida, but they're going into their own ecosystems, right? It's interesting, too. I want to go back to Highest. That's very important. Secretary of Homeland Security was a board member on Highest. If you go to highest.org, you'll see them congratulating him when he gets to be nominated for the Secretary of Homeland Security. Now, Highest, if you look on their highest.org, you'll see all these donors, like there's 9 different Shapiros and there's Pritzkers and all these guys. And it's interesting because the majority of people coming through right now are from Venezuela. There's a massive amount of Hezbollah in Venezuela, and they speak Spanish fluently, right? They have a very close relationship, Venezuela does, with Iran. If you're Iranian, you can come right in and get a new passport immediately. But there are a lot of Hezbollah who already live there, right? And they have
Hezbollah, who we are now really actually in a conflict with. We've got, what is starting to feel like a potential war going on up, in the Middle East. All those things going on. So that Hezbollah, the Iranian-backed, you're saying that they have people in Venezuela now?
Straight up. I mean, not just now, but for generations. They speak Spanish. There's people back in that area of the world who speak Spanish.
In Iran, like you can find Spanish speakers in Iran?
In Syria and Lebanon.
Okay.
And so what's interesting is that, for instance, recently I had lunch with a Jewish friend in Panama. 3 of his family members were killed in a bombing in 1994 in Panama. And within 1 day of that, there was another bombing at a Jewish center in Argentina, which killed 85 people. And 3 of his family members were killed on the Panama bombing in 1994. So interestingly, the mastermind, who's believed to be the Hezbollah mastermind of the 1994 bombing, he owns a bar in Venezuela right now. I mean, you can't make up this stuff. It's like, you know, Stephen King. I mean, so we've got, and I keep warning my Jewish friends, do you understand huge amounts of Jewish money is pumping Hezbollah into the United States? They're going to meet you on the golf course in Fort Lauderdale. And this is no kidding, full contact. And, you know, you see Mayorkas is down there.
We got some videos, I guess, of some of these bad dudes that you've managed to capture as they're sort of coming in. Let's take a look at this.
Venezuela. Venezuela. Okay.
Guns tattooed on his face, which
gangster.
I mean, that doesn't look good. I suppose it could just be a fashion choice, but you know, when we look at this, I'm hearing reports. I don't know if this is true. The news can be sensational, but some people are saying that there's potential that Venezuela is emptying prisons and sending them up into our country. Now, whether or not that's happening or not, I don't know if you know that, but it could happen, right? It'd be a good idea if you want to save money on, you know, spending on your own problem. People just go ahead and send them up through this open border. Who's going to stop them?
Cuba style. You know, I mean, yeah, a good person to talk with about this is Joseph Highwire. In fact, he just flew in recently to Guatemala to meet with my team and brief for a couple days. He is very knowledgeable on Venezuela and other parts of the world around there, and he can talk your ear off. He's an incredibly intelligent man, and he can tell you about the Hezbollah presence there and how they're made of structures in Central America and whatnot. You know, I was just up in Guatemala and Belize and El Salvador and Honduras looking at the same issues, right? And Panama, of course. There is basically a 4-lane highway coming up to the United States. It's not literally 4-lane. Well, in some places it is. But I mean, but we are being invaded. So we've got this mainline injection coming through. If you can get your feet into South America, you can get to anywhere in the United States very quickly, right? Especially if you've got money and you're Chinese, and those sorts of ecosystems are very quick. Like the Chinese, they don't take the hard route through the Darien Gap. There's many routes through the Darien Gap. If you got money, it's just like a 2-day vacation trip.
Really?
It's literally like it's like some of those adventure vacations that I've taken in Nepal or something, right? I mean, it's really like
What's
fun.
the slowest way? I mean, when you talk about like that, the time that it used to take, I mean, before this was paying attention to, if people were hiking, making their way, how long did that journey, as we understand it, right? We think of people in South America or something that are oppressed. They're coming here as refugees. How long did that journey used to take through the Darien Gap, you know, Panama and up in America? What would the average time take?
Previously, it would be in the months often.
Months.
Right? For instance, just going through the Darien, 7-10 days if you're lucky.
Okay.
I mean, it was a really tough trip. Huge death toll. Even say 3 years ago, Chuck Holton and I were down there, and we guessed that the death rate was probably 10%.
How do they die? What are they dying of?
They die on the Mountain of Death, Montaña de Muerte, or they die on what's called the Four Crossings. They get killed by the Indians out there and the FARC on the other side and Colombia side. They die. They just disappear often. Malaria, waterborne illnesses. Some literally get hypothermia. You actually cross over the Mountain of Death is the Continental Divide, right? So they actually cross the Continental Divide coming in. It's not very high. It's like 4,000 feet or whatever. But you can get, I mean, a lot of them get hypothermia. You know, that jungle floor is quite cold, actually, if you're sleeping on it. So they're wet. They're sweaty. A lot of them, their feet are just completely ate up because they go to sleep with their boots on or their shoes on. You should see their feet coming out. But the Chinese take a much easier route. They're more sophisticated. They've got for them, they come out clean, smiling, you know, they're like selfies, you know. And by the time they come over Yuma, they're really in good condition, the Chinese, because they're coming through their own organized Chinese system.
Now we have images you have of these NGOs go around handing out rape kits to these giant compounds. This is you know, what's in this? I mean, it's amazing to me. Like, here, you might need this. Here you go. What's in there?
Yeah, that's IOM or OIM, and she's Venezuelan, and that's Masako Ganaha on the left, and Matt Tomlett, somebody I go to the Darien with a lot. And so she gave us one of her rape kits. She had already made it through, and that has female condoms, male condoms, the abortion pills, that flashlight. I accidentally dropped it and it shattered. I mean, it's, you know, probably made in China. But IOM hands these things out. And, you know, because so many women and children get raped out there.
I mean, that's the thing, too. Like, when we think about the humanitarian side, I mean, I think part of this argument's been going on in America, which I think is starting to shift. It's starting to turn, which is oh, you know, it's a humanitarian mission. We got to allow these people in. They're really, being oppressed wherever they are. They're in danger. I spent some time at the border just last year, and I'll say that when I was there, we went in the middle of the night, and it was all Africans, and the busloads would show up. They would cross the border. At one point, it was all Congolese for the most part. And then there was another one that was more Middle Eastern. And I think, honestly, of all the people we saw, about 400 or 500 come through that night, I would say maybe 3 or 4 actually were making an asylum claim that I'm in danger, my government's trying to kill me, whether or not that's true or not. Everybody else was just like, I want a job, I want an American dream. And that's not what this is about. There's a reason, and humanitarian-wise, they're all paying the cartels. I mean, and more reports, their cartels are making more money now off of running our border than they ever used to make off of drugs.
Oh, I could go on for hours. I mean, for instance, every day there's flights from Africa that go through Istanbul, that go through Bogota, and then they come up. Now, if you fill out the CBP One app, which is an app that many have on their telephone, just download it, then you can just fly straight from Colombia or Guatemala to the United States. Many of the people don't cross the border that way. They come in through Atlanta or Los Angeles or Houston or whatever, right? And if you're in an airport and you see people with the IOM bag or OIM bag, you'll know they're probably in that ecosystem. A lot of them actually are coming up through the Canadian border. That's the border nobody really talks about, but that's it's the biggest border in the world. And so actually some of the Chinese we know now are taking boats up to Canada and coming through that way, right? Wow. So they're hitting us from every different direction, like a hydra. They're coming in on student visas, work visas. They're just sneaking over the border. They're flying in on Swift Air flights 24/7.
Now, you've been looking at this for many years, and a lot of the reporting now is that it's worse than it's ever been. Is that true? Do you feel like it's worse than it's ever been, or are we just now suddenly paying attention to it?
It's objectively worse than it's ever been. And I can tell you, like last year when I sat in the same chair talking with you, I didn't predict what was happening now. Like in the Iraq and Afghan wars, a lot of people credited me with good prediction skills. And I'm like, actually, it was already happening. I'm just telling you what's already happening. Like, I'm telling you that they're building more infrastructure and they're adding more buses to the routes in Panama. So it looks like a prediction when I say more people are going to come, when I'm like, well, I just saw them building the new camps and putting new buses
planning
on the routes.
For more people,
so,
right?
And Highest and the rest are bringing more people down, right? So, I mean, they're clearly, it's the ecosystem down in Colombia and Ecuador and whatnot are being plussed up. And so, yeah, it's not much of a prediction. It's kind of cheating. I know the answer in the back of the book.
Where's Panama at with this? I mean, I would think there must be money pouring in just from people coming in. They're coming from nations all around the world. Are they getting funding out of this? Is there a reason why they're allowing these gigantic camps to be set up as just a holding place for people that are trying to get to our country? Why would they even put up with it unless they're making money off of it?
Oh, yeah, they make money. You make money every step of the way. That's one of the things that IOM and USAID and the rest will do is they create sort of a business model, right? So they create a self-igniting, like if IOM and the rest disappear right now, the routes are now open and they are now internally funded. There's an internal rate of return at this point, right? I mean, without any external funding going in, this machine is working, right? Because every taxi driver, every hotel, the boat drivers, they all make money, right? And so, and a lot of the aliens coming through, like the Chinese, they are funding their own way. A lot of the others from places like Congo, they're being funded, and they'll tell you that at times. They're like, I don't know who bought my airplane ticket. I don't know. Wow. But yeah, some of the people, in fact, just with Chris Martinson and Brett Weinstein just a few weeks ago down there, I think the guys were from Congo, actually. And we've got it on video. And the guy was like, I don't know who bought the ticket, right? I was sitting right there with him at one of the camps, actually right next to where the guy was saying, the Venezuelan gangster.
So we're hearing, and I don't want to make this political. This is not a political show, like who's in charge of what, but I do hear Joe Biden saying, I need funding, that like as though he somehow wants to stop this. There's nothing in my mind that sees any attempt to actually stop this. Mayorkas, you have incredible photos walking around a camp, seeing it. So this is my question. America, you would think we would be funding like how to stop this surge coming. And I think so many of us has been focused on like the border, whether or not we have a wall or not. Do we fund the wall? Do we take down the wall? That's been the whole argument. You're talking about long before there's a wall, there's a whole funding system that is setting up this massive push towards our country. Is America funding that? Are we funding that earlier, first stop, Panama? Are we funding that?
Oh, Brett Weinstein and Dr. Martinson, Ann Vandersteel, Masako Ganaha, Chuck Holton, we were all just down there together looking at it again. I think if you have Brett on, he's going to have some things to say because he saw it with his own eyes. And, people ask me all the time, who's funding this? And I'll say the United States. And they'll say, but actually who's funding? I'll say like America, But who's actually behind it? I'm like, the United States of America is doing it full stop. We are the #1 funder of IOM. Number 2 is Germany. Number 3 is Canada. I was just over in El Salvador. And let
me read this quote. The WHP is a U.S. government-supported program that has operated since 2011. The State Department's Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration provides funding as a contribution to IOM to implement the program. U.S. Department of State is funding this company that runs these camps and teaches people what they need to say for every stop along the way so that they have the smoothest trip straight through our border.
More than 200 NGOs, IGOs, and nonprofits. It might be 254 or something like that. And then there's all these. They're hard to track, actually. It's like tracking water flows in the jungle. But the main funder is the United States. I was just up in El Salvador and went to I always go to the IOM offices, right? And so there was an IOM office in El Salvador, and it's in the same building as the Canadian consulate. Now keep that in mind as I tell you. Just before that, we were in Honduras, went to the IOM office, and they're in the same building as the Canadian consulate or embassy in Honduras, right? Why? Canada is the number 3 funder of IOM. And in fact, Honduras just kicked Taiwan out. And now IOM is moving to the old Taiwanese embassy. And we went there as well. There was IOM cars coming and going. We went over and talked with there's much more going on than, there's the energy routes. I mean, what we're really talking about here is Panama is one of the most vital pieces of terrain on Earth, right? I mean, there's the Panama Canal, and then there's the Pan American Highway, and then just its location, right? And so one of the things that we're talking about is the Intercontinental Railway down in South America, the corridors that are coming up through Texas, the I-64 corridor. Mm-hmm. We could go on for hours about this, but there's reasons why I go to these certain places, like why I took Jordan Peterson around Netherlands. It's about these energy routes and these.
What is an energy route? What do you mean by that? What is an
for instance. Well, actually, let's talk about just shipping. Like the Panama Canal, which opened in 1914. The United States, of course, finished or made it, and then you've got often I'll leave Panama and go to Netherlands. Now you'll see a railway that goes all the way from Shanghai to Rotterdam, right? The biggest harbor in Europe, and it's one of the top 10 in the world. And just south of Rotterdam is Antwerp. Or the second largest harbor, right? Two of the top 10 in the world. But that railway from Shanghai, I've been to that side of it, empties out at Rotterdam. And at Rotterdam, in Netherlands, they're working on Tri-State City. Tri-State City, we talked about a year ago, right? And now they've made a lot more progress in that 1 year. Tri-State City is this smart city they want to make with 30 million people that will have both of those harbors. And the Chinese railway goes right to it. A lot of this is about corridors, right? You'll see, for instance, RGV down in McAllen and Brownsville and whatnot. Yeah. That is I-64 corridor. It comes right all the way down through Central America, through Darien. They're building a bridge in Darien. I just took Brett Weinstein to it.
Yeah, what is that bridge for? Why build a bridge? Why, they're making it easier, faster to move? Is that?
They're going to open up to Colombia. Now, when I talk with Panamanians about this, including government people, they're like, there's not any bridge being built down there. I'm like, you see the mud on my boots? I was just down there hours ago, right? In fact, I just took Brett Weinstein down again, and Dr. Martinson and the rest. And Ann Vandersteel made a video from the bridge they're building now, and it went viral. They translated it to Spanish, and the Panamanians are like, what? They're bridging Darien. Now, the government says, no, they're just going out to this one village down there and whatnot. But they're clearly opening. The Chinese have published a book, right? Well, they published it in Spanish. I've got it in English. And they talk about how they're going to open the Darien and how it's going to connect with the bioceanic corridor down in South America and what they're doing in Ecuador, what they're doing in all these different places, right? That's why I was just up in El Salvador looking at a port that they're working on up there. And I mean, when I was in San Salvador, Chinese Communist Party is I always go and look at museums. I look at archaeological warfare, which is very important. And I look at their bookstores and their libraries, right? So I went to El Salvador. I'm looking at libraries. So Chinese Communist Party is putting in a library now, 7 floors. I was just in it like a month or so ago. And it's got a big Chinese Communist Party flag, a big CCP flag out in the front in downtown El Salvador, or San Salvador, right? You see that you see that emblem on the lower left? It looks like sort of like a flower.
Yeah.
That's China Aid. That's like USA, but that's China Aid, right?
Wow.
And I was just over in that's the library actually, but I didn't take that photo. But anyway, but that emblem, I was just over in Armenia and Georgia looking at this as well, and you'll see that little emblem all over the place in Armenia and Georgia.
So let's get to, you're obviously there. I get it. You're watching these patterns. I want to get in sort of the question I always ask people, who is the they? What is the why? You're talking about China. You're talking the CCP. Why are they pushing all these Chinese on purpose to leave their own continent, their country, to land here and push through illegally, not legally, to go into our country? They're planning the route. They're putting them there. They're making it easy. They're coming with money. I mean, you call it an invasion. What is the plan? Why is this going on?
Different groups have different ideas, right?
China, what's their plan?
China to take the United States, straight up. And for instance, they do a huge information. Keep in mind, I've written 3 books on Chinese information war. Unfortunately, they're all in Japanese. They're not in English because I've been working to wake up Japan. But the bottom line is, for instance, when I was just down in Honduras, we went there specifically to look at this archaeological thing. So they've got Chinese archaeological teams down there trying to persuade the Mayans that you're our long-lost cousins, right? And so, and all these bad white people came and took your land, right? So they do this all over.
So you're really Chinese?
Oh, yeah, they do it.
They're convincing them that they're Chinese.
Oh, straight up. And they do the same in Okinawa.
So they came across the the Great Barrington,
right.
frozen, and that's the Native Americans and ultimately South Americans and everything. And they come and pitch this story and say, you're one of us.
Straight up. And so, for instance, I was just on Roatan, the island in Honduras. First, we were on the mainland, and then we went to Roatan, and I was meeting with an interesting fellow. And I said, do you know any people on the top levels of the Honduran government that's been to China recently? And he said, yeah, I know a general. He was the top general, actually. He was like their chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And he's of Chinese descent, so they invited him over. So I said, oh, that's interesting. Can we invite him to dinner tomorrow? And he's like, well, he's in Tegucigalpa, which is like an hour flight away. And I said, can we fly him in? So we flew him in. The next day we had dinner with him, right? And we talked for, 3-4 hours. And he talked about how his grandfather, I think, came over in 1924-ish. And so he's what they will call overseas Chinese. So they took him over to China 6 or 7 times, showed him the graves of his family, and had a parade. They always have a parade for him. I see this all over, right? Yeah. And so they had a parade for him, and now he is what they call an overseas Chinese, right? They're like, look how great he is. He is the top general of he's a very interesting guy, and I think a very smart man.
But he's sympathetic, obviously, now to the plan and to move people.
They pull you in, right? They pull you in. And so, for instance, I spent about a year running around China. It's quite an interesting place. In any case, he's what's called an overseas Chinese, right? So they do this all over the world, like in Thailand, Malaysia, or whatever. They get the people that are in key positions. They'll recruit influential children through their Confucius Institutes, one of which, or 2 of which at least, are in Panama City, one of which is just near the IOM office. If you don't know what Confucius Institute, those guys are important, right?
Okay.
Whole different story. I've been fighting them for 11 years now. But the Confucius Institute... All right, let's go back from overseas Chinese to what they're doing with the information war. You'll see, for instance, in the United States, they're trying to persuade Chinese that, hey, we built all these roads to Yellowstone and all this stuff, right?
Wow.
You'll see actual, Chinese forest ranger saying, hey, this is actually built by... I read a book about the, intercontinental...
Is it true? I mean, would you say it's true?
There's probably is truth to it. There probably is. Like the Intercontinental Railway, I read a book on that by Gordon Chang. Not the Gordon Chang on my friend on Fox, but the other Gordon Chang.
Okay.
And in fact, I messaged to Gordon Chang. I was like, "Yeah, I just read your book." He goes, "That's the other Gordon Chang." I was like, well, anyway, interesting book. But it was about how the Chinese were involved in building the Intercontinental Railway, right? Yeah. And how the Irish and others built it from one direction and the Chinese from the other. But what they're trying to do is claim basically ownership. We did all these things. We are actually, all these indigenous people are actually descendants of the Chinese. When I was in Tibet, interestingly, I learned that they were trying to make a connection between Navajo and Tibetans, right? Like, hey, we have the same jewelry, our faces look the same, and they actually do to me.
Yeah, I've seen some of that conversation. Okay. Why would America be funding this? And, you know, I look at the WEF. I know the WEF is the same. A lot of these funding bodies that are funding all of these things are also part of WEF. You just had the whole meeting in Davos. They're telling everybody everyone's going to be a renter. No one's going to own anything. You're going to be happy. Does that play in here somehow to this invasion of America? And ultimately, this is what I always struggle with. Is I don't care what party you're in. Why would anybody that gets the job to be leader of the free world as president of the United States want to support a global move to just wipe out our own borders? Like, wouldn't you be like, I'm king of the world, man. I got like America. Why would you, what would be the motivation to destroy your border and weaken your own power, weaken the power of the United States of America? That's what I've never been able to put together. Why would you do that?
Well, you know, when it comes to the paradigm that I use to look at the world, anytime I feel the emotion of surprise, I know my paradigm is off. And I can tell you're feeling that emotion.
I'm surprised, right, yeah.
And I don't mean like surprise you wake up with a snake in your bed, but,
yeah.
You know, and also your paradigm should be really predictive, right? It's quite clear, by the way, that intergenerationally, dog kings have been installed. Dog king is an old information war term from Sweden, Norway, where you would run off an enemy king and you would make a literal dog into a king, right? Give it a crown and a throne and have a translator and say, this is your king. And people are like, well, that's a dog. They're like, well, it's your king, right? You'll do what the dog says, and the dog, this is its translator. Right?
Yeah.
And so the dog king, this is an old term. It's not used much anymore, but as somebody who studies information war, we run into this, our team does.
Yeah.
So, and so what this does is it demoralizes the subjects of the dog king, and it emboldens your enemies, right? So you can see Biden is a clear meat puppet. He's a dog king. You can see Trudeau, he's a dog king, right? Mm-hmm. He's obviously not fit to be a barista, right? And so we see this in many countries where these dog kings have been installed. They'll do anything. Biden, obviously, even before he was in this mental state, was as corrupt can possibly be, right? There's nothing that he won't do. It's clear. And so they have over space. Abbott is clearly a member of WEF, right? It's very easy to predict that what's happening in Eagle Pass, for instance, is nonsense, right? I spent a lot of time down in Eagle Pass. You know, so we've got
That's what's going on right now.
Right.
I mean, I would push back on that a little bit, but I'm not as deep in as you are. I will say this about Abbott, and again, this isn't like a political show, but I would say that Abbott has pulled off one of the greatest media, coups around this issue, which is by busing these people all around the country. I think you can give him, you can say he's responsible for this change in the polling around this, which is now everybody's concern. So whether he's corrupt or not, I don't know, but I do know this. That move was brilliant, and that move has got attention now, finally. Something you've worked at for so long has got national, if not world attention by doing that, by saying this is all of you. It's not just my problem down here. I'm going to make it everybody's problem. I think that's pretty brilliant.
I see it completely the opposite, actually.
Okay.
He's injecting them deeper into our system. He's clearing the banks of the Rio Grande and the camps that are more camps are being built in Texas, by the way. And he's clearing the banks and getting more in here, right? Clearly, the invasion continues. Now, he could stop this. He could stop it with vehicle inspections. There's many ways. He has mechanisms that he could definitely put Mexico on its back foot, but he doesn't, right?
Yeah.
For instance, right now, he just ran over to Mumbai, right? And why did he run to Mumbai specifically? By the way, as soon as I saw that he was in India, I thought, he probably went to Mumbai. And why did I think Mumbai? Because that fits the paradigm. Mumbai is the beginning of the new the Indo-European corridor, right? The Indo-European, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
The Indo-European corridor starts at Mumbai. And I think it's not a coincidence that he often goes to McAllen. I was at McAllen last year when he came, and he was at the Hyatt Hotel, I think it was. And he was this close to me, and he was, out there talking. And people in McAllen, I talked with the mayor, and people are like, wow, he always comes down to McAllen.
Okay.
Well, he comes to McAllen because that's part of the I-69 corridor that goes up to Detroit, where World Economic Forum has another headquarters in Detroit. They're clearly making a move for the Great Lakes. But anyway, World Economic Forum and CCP, you asked that question, the Chinese Communist Party, right? They are consanguinated. They cooperate closely. Now, my team and I have looked at this a lot for the last couple of years. Who's zooming who? Who's in charge here?
Yeah.
One partner is dominant over the other. I think, I'm unclear about this, but I think that the Chinese Communist Party is the dominant partner. It's unclear. They both know they're going to fight
partners
each other.
being America or China, you feel like China is dominating.
Well, World Economic Forum is not America. These are like
WEF and China. Is that what you're saying are the two partners?
Yeah.
Okay. Just
and because, they have annual meetings in China as well, right?
Right.
And you'll see the Chinese always at Davos and whatnot. And so anyway, but you got to keep in mind they have different end goals. For instance, when I was in Hong Kong, at that 2019-20, before they finally sort of took Hong Kong, there were Chi-Nazi signs everywhere. I mentioned this last year when we were together. And I asked many Chinese, or Hong Kongers, I often ask the same question over and over. Why do you call them Chi-Nazis? And they're like, well, because fascism is when government and business are just entwined and you can't tell them apart. And then you just add a huge racial component. And they're like, the Han Chinese of the Chinese Communist Party are incredibly racist. And they are. I've spent about a year running around China. It's over the top. And the Chinese Communist Party is crystal clear that they want to make the world genetically Chinese. They don't hide it. They say it. They write it. They say it in speeches and books.
Let's take a break from that. There's a convoy right now, right here just outside of Austin. This is it. We the people taking our border back. Take our border back convoy. There's a bunch of cars and trucks getting together. And our friends, Laura Logan, who is preparing to be a part of this convoy, and Dr. Pete Chambers. And my understanding is they're standing by, can just talk to us about what's happening with that right now. All right.
Oh, there's Lara now. Hey,
there
Doc.
we go, Lara. And Dr. Pete Chambers. So,
how you doing?
You guys, what is this convoy about? And why do you think this is important?
Well, I believe it's important because it's going to shed light on the open border policy, which is resulting in second and third order effects of an invasion on this border. We're talking about chemical warfare, that's fentanyl. We're talking about human trafficking, that's children, women that are being used as pawns, and sometimes worse. And that's what I believe it is. But
Laura,
they're going to shed light to that.
Laura, I know that we've spoken many times. This has been an issue you've been covering for years. It feels like it's coming to a climactic point. I've been reporting all during this show. Now, for the first time ever, it appears that in America, this is polling as the #1 issue for most Americans, passing economy during a presidential campaign. Why is that? Why is this suddenly now finally getting the attention that I think you've been trying to bring to it for many years?
Because of the scale, Del, because we've never seen anything like it in recorded history, not since this country was founded. And for a long time, they were able to keep the scale hidden. One of the first things they did was deny the media access to the Border Patrol, the processing centers and all the areas down at the border to keep them away. And then if you remember, there was a sort of a slip up with the Haitians, because there were all those images that got out of the Haitians, like over 12,000 gathered under the bridge. And what did they do? The moment that got national attention, they dispersed everybody. So a big part of the open borders policy of this administration has been to make sure that nobody can see it. They want nobody to be able to see what they're doing. And the moment you get all those people gathered together, the jig is up, right? The deception is over. So that's why it's coming to attention now. But it really should have been, should have come to everybody's attention right from the very beginning. And then Michael, he's seen the pipeline, right? So people are just dealing with what is right here. On the doorstep, but also all across the U.S. now, and they're not even looking looking at the millions and millions and millions of people still on their way. So this is not going to get any slower. What I do know is the Biden administration has made a deal with the Mexican government, with AMLO, the leader of Mexico, to kind of slow things down, because this is embarrassing them, because this is an issue that unites the whole country. Doesn't matter if you're Democrat, Republican, or you're black or white, or you're Hispanic. This is why, you know, down at the border, there was an historic flip in the last election, right, where you had a county down in Laredo that had been blue forever, and it went for Donald Trump. It's because this is not a racial issue, and they can push the race component all they like. They can say over and over again, this is, you know, this wouldn't be happening if these people were white, and it's a lie. So that lie never ever sticks, right? But they've used it very successfully to suppress the conversation, and now it's of such a scale, it's erupting, and people don't understand. Pete can tell you, he's been down in all these small areas along the border. They've been overrun. Ranches have been overrun. People's private property decimated. I live, you know, about 200 miles from the border. Even here, businesses are being told to close at 3 in the afternoon instead of 5, because the local sheriffs say we can't protect you. And, you know, right near your business is a waypoint, right, where they sleep on their way to the I-10 corridor to go through Bexar County, where more than half the people who are trafficked in this country go through Bexar County, leads you right to Houston. So, I mean, this is a crisis of unimaginable proportions, because Border Patrol thought, well, you know, when we hit a certain point, they're going to push back like they always do. No, that didn't happen. You know, and then it just kept climbing and climbing and climbing, and nobody does anything about it. And, you know, Michael's points about Governor Abbott are pretty interesting, because, you know, there's a lot that Abbott could have done that he hasn't, and he does make a big show about it. This is a big showdown now, but and to clarify one point, I'm not part of the convoy. I'm here to cover the convoy for one very specific reason, which is that I'm afraid that they will try to manipulate this and represent it as another fake insurrection, or as an act of domestic terrorism, or something like that, which is not true. I mean, Doc Chambers here, you know, the media has thrown aspersions over his character, over his record, that he's not really a Green Beret when he was a flight surgeon, for goodness sake, for 3rd Group Special Forces. He was, you know, he was very well thought of during his time in the military, and is still highly regarded and respected by everybody. So you have good people who have given up everything, who are, you know, who are doing this for nothing. They're not getting paid to do this, but they see the crisis, they understand the ramifications, and they're standing up to do something about it. Then they get vilified by the media so that they can make this all about race when it has nothing to do with race.
Dr. Chambers, this is something we've talked about it. I know you've been going down, as Laura has said, visiting these different places. I mean, on both sides of the border, we're allowing the drug cartels to run both sides of the border. This is dangerous, not just for the towns on our side of the border, but all of these individuals and towns that used to be safe and quiet, they're being affected. We are literally just deferring all of our immigration system to the cartel. Right. I mean, what are you seeing? How dangerous is that for the future of this nation?
That's completely dangerous. It's a national security issue, and it's a semi-permissive environment all the way up. It used to be to Foul Furious, which was about 90 miles in. That was a year and a half ago when I was serving in uniform for Governor Abbott on Task Force Operation Lone Star. Now it's all the way across Texas. It's moved up into Arkansas. It's up into Oklahoma. It's moving up the corridors very quickly because the numbers are pushing. This human osmotic pressure, as Michael Yon, you just had on, calls it, is exactly what's pushing that specific permissiveness. That's not good.
Do you think, I mean, you know, Michael's saying that he believes America is funding this. Is that your sense, Dr. Chambers, when you're looking at it?
Yes, sir. There are portions of it. Yes, sir. We have receipts on that. There are portions of that are through Todd Bensman. You can talk to him, Center for Immigration Studies. He has the receipts, and we work with these gentlemen. And we collectively, we the people, are doing this. That's why this convoy is doing this, and I am working as a liaison to law enforcement who is understanding that the importance of the people. Because when the people start speaking and they're working peacefully and they're assembling, this brings light to it. This convoy is not 700,000 trucks as it was originally spoken. This is several hundred. But what this has brought is light to this. And that will then speak constitutionally.
Del, I want to just speak to the money part of it. You know, a government report just came out where they admitted that they had spent $20 billion on resettlement in 2021 and 2022 alone. $20 billion, $5 billion of that went to unaccompanied minors. And they haven't come up with the figures for 2023 yet. I just want to say, I can't say this strongly enough, right? Because I'm a mama bear. So I'm a journalist, but I'm also a mother. And when you hear, as we have, as they've admitted, that some 85,000 children have gone missing, you've got a company like MVM that's moving 9,000 kids, and they don't know. These guys who move the kids, they're not allowed to talk to them. They're not allowed to help them. These kids are begging them, please don't take me there. I don't know these people. This is when they're supposed to be going to their sponsors. Remember the whole point of unaccompanied minors, right? The idea was you're coming here without your parents because your parents, your family are already here and you're coming to be reunited. But instead, these kids are going into the foster care system. What? Why? I mean, the foster care system is in an absolute shambles. It's a disgrace. They've been complicit in trafficking kids for years, along with the family courts. And so now you're going to take illegal immigrant children who do not even speak English, many of them, and you're going to put them in the foster care system. Is that a better life? Are these kids really going to get a better life than the one that they had when they were in their own country, in their own culture? Everybody spoke the language and they knew people and they knew how to navigate that terrain. Here, what are they? They're absolutely nothing. And no one has addressed this issue. If these are unaccompanied minors coming to be reunited with their families, where are the families? No, they're going to sponsors. These sponsors sometimes are getting 10, 20, 50, 100 kids. When, you know, there's a woman, Tara Rodas. That's a woman you should have on your show. She's also connected to a whole bunch of other whistleblowers. She works in the Inspector General's office. She amazingly still has her job, right? It's incredible. And Tara went down there as a volunteer because they put out an all call across the government because they don't have enough people to process. She speaks Hispanic. She thought she was going to be playing jigsaw puzzles, you know, and helping kids color and just keeping them company till they got to their families. Instead, she found that the government was trafficking kids. Because think about this, the people who bring the kids to America's door, right? That's one job. So you've got the traffickers that deliver them to the border. Then Border Patrol receives them. Their orders from the federal government are that you have to receive them and then you process them. And then what do? You hand them over to an NGO or to HHS, who hands them over to an NGO. And then they bring in a contractor, right, like MVM, and they move them to wherever you want them to go. They say, they get someone to phone and say, I'm the sponsor. Can you imagine that a sponsor just has to make a phone call? You don't have to see any real documentation. Wow. They get fake papers all the time. And then we, the taxpayer, pay to fly them halfway across the country or wherever it is they're going to, and then we house them and so on. So we're getting them to the destinations where the traffickers want them. And I'm working with a group that's done counter-trafficking since the 90s. I mean, they got a list of kids that were missing. The first two that they looked into, a boy and a girl, they found that they had been delivered to sex workers. Okay, so it's to me, I just think it's unbelievable. There's all these people out there that say, oh, shame, these poor people. You know, it's really cruel. We've got to let them in. You need to understand that you're letting that child in and sending it to a sex worker so that that child can be raped every single day until they die. And they're violently abused, they're often tortured, they endure unimaginable things, and they usually the average child lasts around 2 years before they're murdered. So this is not a better life. And you've been lied to and deceived. It's really important that people understand. Sure, there are some people that come here and have a chance at a better life, but they're minuscule because, as Michael Jan has said, as Doc pointed out, the people running this and getting rich off this, getting the richest, are the most violent transnational criminal organizations in the world. And I find it very hard to believe. I know they're not doing it without the sort of the permission of the Biden administration, at best permission, because before Biden even took office, he sent Jake Sullivan and other emissaries from his administration all over Latin America to do public speaking tour, letting everybody know that the border was going to be open. They wanted the outcome they have, and that's why they don't call it a crisis.
Amazing, Laura. Thank you for joining us today. Any last words? I know you guys, are going to be tracking this convoy, and I want to hear all about it. Dr. Chambers, any last thoughts before we let you go?
Yeah, I'm going to continue to work here to make sure that the infiltrators are pointed out, because we have the names of the infiltrators and we know who they are. And they are going to they have to understand that there is law, and the Constitution of the state of Texas and the United States will uphold those laws, and we will continue to work with law enforcement to make that happen.
I really
Texas
appreciate
militia
both
group,
of you.
Right? They're on the radar.
Texas, there are several different Texas militia groups, but we have them on the radar, and and the eyes of Texas are upon you.
We're watching
and
now.
Dal, that's one of the most important things, because nobody here wants this to turn into another fake insurrection, right? Everybody here that I have spoken to is peaceful, law-abiding. They support the sheriffs, local law enforcement. They support, the governor and the attorney general took this position on Article 4 of the Constitution on states' rights. Right. People here want a secure border, but they're not going hunting down migrants and all the other BS that so much of the media is talking about. Yeah. They're desperate to create some kind of false flag event here, and there's a lot of people are staying away because they say, well, I don't want this to be another January 6th, right? I don't want to get caught up in this. Is this going to be unsafe?
Well, I mean, that is the problem, right? That is part of what they've done,
yes,
too, is to scare us away from our right to assemble, to make it a bad thing, to make it seem like a violent thing. And I really think what we have got to celebrate is, the right to peaceful protest. I'm glad you're there. I know that, you're
can't
part
surrender.
of making that
surrender.
Stay peaceful. Good. All right. Well, I appreciate you two joining us. Thank you so much for taking the time and bringing us up to date on this convoy that's taking place right now as we speak. Take care. God bless.
Del, you're 3 minutes up the road. Get your ass down here.
Okay. I'll see y'all in about 15 minutes.
All right. Well, I'm going to send Michael
See
on
you
the
now,
way.
Michael.
Very good. Take care. All right. Well, sort of to wrap this up, right? I mean, this thing is coming to a head in this country, and they bring up a good point. We've got to handle this in a peaceful way. What do you think is the answer? What's the takeaway for people watching right now? What can we do to make a difference on this issue? And we're a nation of diversity, right? I mean, that's what makes us great. We've all ultimately, come from, every corner of the earth, and that diversity is what makes us powerful. It's what makes us unique. We have every religion represented, every race. But, we have to have rules. We have to have a border, or then, what are we? Are we, so how do we get there? What do we need to do right now?
Well, I think a lot of people don't realize we are actually in a war, and that's not an overstatement. It's a clear war. It's a hybrid war. The issues that you cover with pharma constantly are a huge component. I mean, obviously, those have been devastating already, and you know better than anybody how that trajectory is quite concerning, to put it mildly. And then there's the demographic war, which is intense. Economic war, of course. And then there's one thing, I warned about a couple of years ago. When the Panama Canal has problems, watch the Suez. Yeah, and magically it is now, right? And the Panama Canal has obvious problems now for water issues and whatnot. And the global shipping is taking a big hit. This is a big deal. Whole separate topic, but it's related to the larger hybrid war that's unfolding. As a war correspondent and somebody who's studied war for many years and many wars and conflicts, I don't see how this ends with anything less than huge bloodshed. Because this is the reason I've spent most of my life overseas, out of the United States, right? Even though my English is fluent, I'm American hardcore, but I'm mostly downrange. I'm mostly in the countries these people come from, right? Almost 100 countries that I've been to now, right? And so what I'm seeing is some fish don't mix well in the same aquarium. Diversity can be very important. It can also be a shot in the heart, right? When, for instance, now we have many what I call anthro-insula, human islands forming. For instance, we used to have that in Germany with Germans, of course, New Braunfels and whatnot. They would just, charter ships and move the whole village over. And they, of course, they would speak German and stay German up until World War I and World War II. It became unfashionable to speak German. But what I'm getting to is when you come over with enough people in your various ecosystems, your anthro-insula, to create balkanization, actually, it will end up being the end of your country. Certainly a country like the United States. I was just down in Belize, and I looked for the Mennonites, actually, and because I wanted to talk with them about different things. And, of course, they're still speaking Niederdeutsch, Low German. And very interesting people. But you'll see these. One of the things that creates an anthro insula is when you, in other words, like a spot of oil in the water, is whether or not that culture will marry into the other culture, right? Mm-hmm. And for instance, the Mennonites don't marry in much, as you can imagine, and that's what we have a lot now. We have big, huge groups of Somalis, big, huge groups of this, that, and the other. Who's who in the zoo, and on the fish chart of which cultures mixed together. Let's say Filipinos are green, 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 amber with other Filipinos, green, green. Filipinos get along with everybody. Yep. Chechens are red, 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 amber with other Chechens. And so keep in mind, again, I'm usually the Xeno. I'm usually the one. Sometimes the only white man I see for like a month is when I shave occasionally, right? And so I'm usually out there alone in China or someplace, right? So I see a lot of different cultures, and I see how they interact with each other. For instance, Kurds. I get along great with Kurds, whether I'm up with them in northern Iraq or whatever, or Kurdistan as they would call it. But the Kurds, when they go, for instance, in Japan recently, Kurds will go, when you have Kurds and Turks together, or Kurds and Arabs, they're going to fight. I mean, you've got these, or Kurds and Kurds. So the Kurds just had a big knockdown, drag out recently in Japan. It was Kurd on Kurd. And then the injured went to the hospital, and the Kurds showed up to the hospital, and they're fighting each other at the hospital. The Japanese were like, what's going on? I'm like, well, that's how Kurds roll. And you've welcomed them into Japan, and now you're going to have to deal with it. I mean, bottom line.
Wow. Well, obviously, I think that one of the things that, at least around this topic, the one thing that gives me hope is that we need to sort of start uniting as Americans. We've got to start coming together. The pressures on this country and the pressures on this dream of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are real. They're coming from border issues. They're coming from AI technology, central, banking, digital currencies. All of these things we talk about on our show are very, very pressing issues that could rob us, like literally overnight, of any concept of freedom, where we're actually free to drive where we want, talk to who we want, say what we want, gather with who we want. I think that issues like this, it feels like this country is all starting to at least someplace saying, you know what, I think we have some common ground on this issue. I think around the pharmaceutical industry and faith in experts, we're starting to, as we said today, 58% are now saying, I don't think you can just trust these people. I think you have to do your own homework. It feels like this pressure is making us wake up in a lot of ways. Are we going to wake up in time?
Well, I know this will be very unpopular, but we're going to need mass deportations if we're going to stay together. And again, I spend most of my time downrange and in these other countries, and I've been in a lot of wars and a lot of conflicts, and I see what's coming. That's why I returned to the United States in 2020, because I could see, I feel like an oncologist who has treated cancer for years and years, and suddenly you walk into the room, I don't need the x-rays, I can smell it, right? And I can smell war coming here. It clearly is. And it's intentional. It's a hybrid war. You can see the demographic war that's unfolding. This is same as happening in Europe. They're a little bit more advanced stages than we are. You can see, for instance, Tri-State City. Yeah. The Netherlands and others are taking the farms away.
Well, right now, as we say, you got the Parliament and the EU surrounded right now by farmers that have just had it. Going after a way of life and going after a food supply. Well, I mean, you're not alone. I've had other people that have sat here and, many predictions. 2024 is a lot of people have predicted that we're on the verge of a civil war here in America. I pray that that's not true. I pray that you're wrong.
It's not true as well.
I pray that you're wrong.
Because I've been in civil wars, and it's about the ugliest thing except for famine. Yeah. The civil wars are absolutely, don't want any part of it. That's why I came back, doing anything I could to derail it, avert it, stop it, slow it down. But in fact, it's picking up steam because people are not recognizing who's actually doing this. For instance, the United States is invading itself because they have been captured by World Economic Forum. And again, they are co-sanguinated with the Chinese Communist Party, right? I think, I'm unclear actually, I'm unsure, but I think the dominant party in that is the CCP over WEF. They will fight each other eventually though, because they have different in-state goals. They have short-term and intermediate goals that are overlap quite a lot.
Yeah.
For instance, destabilizing, taking Panama, taking all of Central America. When you go up through, I've been to every country in Central America, from Canada to Colombia inclusively, right? And I've looked at this in great detail. You can see where bit by bit they are setting. Listen, most of the war, when you're going up against sophisticated enemies, most of the war is fought before the first shot is fired. It's setting the table. Amateurs are always talking about sparks. What will the sparks be? It's not about sparks. It's about conditions. It's about setting conditions. And they have been setting demographic conditions, economic conditions, pharmacological conditions.
We'll have to have you on again soon, but thank you for bringing some perspective. This Darien Gap thing is very disturbing. The fact that our own country is fast-tracking people from all around the world. I don't know how we would ever stop terrorists. In fact, it doesn't look like we care. And so huge questions around why this is happening, but I hope you'll continue to keep us informed as you have, and I look forward to the next time you come in.
Please come to Darien with me.
Okay.
You'll see it.
All right, sounds
Thank
good.
you, sir.
All right, look
Appreciate
forward to
it.
it. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, tune in to Nightwatch N8, man. This guy's risking everything to tell you the truth, so you better give him a shot.
Might want to check out Dale Big Tree.
All right, man. Check out the Highwire.
You're an inspiration, man.
Thank you.